All right, now moving forward to our next story, we're going to be looking into an article, an interview article that discusses about a very prominent and well-known figure in the world of animation. But it's not necessarily the interview itself that we're going to look into. It's specifically the one little thing that he said that really sparked a massive discussion that people have in terms of streaming and movie theaters. So with that said, let's go ahead and look into this interview with Pete Docter. Yes, just in time for award season, IndieWire created this interview with the chief creative officer of Pixar Animation Studios, Pete Docter, pretty much discussing everything in his career and also some of the creative things that have been going on in Pixar. So Pete would go and discuss about his early days with the rise of Pixar and working under Steve Jobs and John Lasseter. Then there was the moment when John Lasseter got fired because of the sexual misconducts that he has done over the years, which immediately puts him as the chief creative officer. Then there was the big challenge of, settling into his new job. And then, of course, there was the pandemic. And then it goes all the way down to the release of Inside Out 2, now becoming the new biggest animated feature of all time. But I just want to go and state right now, by the way, if you have not read this article, I highly recommend that you do so. This is actually very fascinating. And again, it doesn't just look into Pete Docter's career, but also some of the creative process going on within Pixar, discussing about the challenges nowadays of creating highly anticipated sequels to their beloved franchises, as well as the challenges with creating original animated movies nowadays. But what I want to focus on specifically is actually this one little excerpt, this one little thing that he has stated, which is right over here, in which the interviewer asks, there was a lot at stake with Inside Out 2 because you had a couple of movies that didn't work as well as most Pixar films. Was it a hangover from the damage that was done during the pandemic? And I'm not going to read all of it, but Pete replied with, we had Soul, Turning Red, and Luca out just on Disney+. Very few people talk about Soul because it didn't have a big theatrical impact. There's something indisputable about that. And that's what many people have discussed about. That's the big thing that a lot of people really went into. It's not necessarily any of the other things that Pete Docter discussed. It's not about what happened afterwards with Pixar having a hard time getting back into theaters, like with the financial failure of Lightyear and also the bad opening of Elemental. But it's specifically how Soul is not as popular as the other Pixar films, mainly because of the fact that it came out on Disney Plus instead of having a prominent theatrical release. And I just want to go and state this right now. If you guys know me, then you know that I love Soul. As much as I really enjoyed the recent Pixar films, I feel like Soul was the last Pixar movie so far that came out as a true masterpiece. That it came out absolutely beautiful, thought-provoking, and extremely well made. I'd even consider it a top contender as one of, if not the best animated feature of this decade so far. But with that said, even though there's been a lot of discussions in regards to Disney's now infamous move of taking those Pixar films and just releasing them exclusively onto Disney Plus instead of just waiting for them to come out in theaters, similarly to what Illumination has done, where they waited during the entire pandemic until it was the right time to go and release Minions: The Rise of Gru. Now, a lot of people have said many things about it, how it was a bad decision, how it negatively impacted both Disney and Pixar. But this is an aspect that not many people have looked into, and that it does bring up a very good point, that this is an additional negative impact of the fact that because it only came out on streaming, you don't see many people discuss about Soul as much as many of the other Pixar movies nowadays. You don't see Soul being discussed as much as something like Coco or the Inside Out movies or even the Toy Story films or anything like that. That it missed that theatrical impact to truly make a true meaning to people. And I will say that I personally had that experience. Like, I actually witnessed that firsthand. Like, when Soul first came out during the pandemic, I already loved it. But last year, I did take that opportunity to also see that on the big screen, because Disney at the time, they were doing limited theatrical releases for those three movies, for Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, to have a chance to show them on the big screen. And like, it barely got any attention. But when I went to go and see Soul, oh yeah, it left a much bigger impact on me. Like, it honestly felt a little bit like a life-changing experience. Like, that was when the message that Soul wanted to come across, like, it really hit so hard when I went to see that on the big screen. It's something that honestly I never got when I watched it on Disney Plus at home. And it really highlights such a massive picture where it describes how the movie theater experience is objectively better than watching anything at home. And this is more true than ever in this day and age. And I know it is bold to go and use the word objectively in this case, but I feel like it is actually true, and I can explain why. Because in this day and age, nowadays, like, we consume media on a regular basis, more so than we ever had in the past. And that is mainly because we would go and consume media, like watching entertainment on our screen, now in like a variety of different ways, but the experience itself is all the same. Rather it be watching a movie or watching a TV show or even watching a video on YouTube, or even right now, if you are watching this, like, rather it be on a live stream or even like watching it later on YouTube, it's all the exact same experience. At the end of the day, entertainment is entertainment, regardless of where you would go and consume it. And that's why watching a YouTube, watching like a video essay on YouTube that's like an hour and a half long, it's not really that different compared to if you would go and watch a movie on the television. You're pretty much doing the same thing, where you're staring at a screen and you're watching some form of entertainment, regardless of what the entertainment itself it might be. So even if you do watch a movie on your television, like, no matter how great it can be, you're still at home and you're still watching it. Now, when you look into the movie theaters, on the other hand, it is a completely different experience because it forces you to be more invested. Because during that whole process of watching a movie on the big screen, you go through this entire journey in order to go and make to go and accomplish that mission. And the reason why I say that it is objectively better is because with movie theaters, you have to get out of the house. Like, honestly, even if you go and build your own movie theater at home, it's not going to be the same experience because it is still at home. With movie theaters, on the other hand, you literally have to get out of the house. You literally have to really go out of your way in order to go and accomplish a simple task like watching a movie. And some people would even bring up, well, technically, going to the movie theaters nowadays is kind of expensive. Like, you got to spend a lot of money just to have that experience of watching a movie. Exactly. And that brings up another factor as to why movie theaters is actually a stronger experience because it makes you more invested. Not only are you going out of your way for the main mission to go and watch a movie, you literally just put in an investment that you put in your time and money to be out of the house, to go and pay the people to get a ticket in order to see a movie. And because of that time and investment that you have spent, it makes you a lot more invested into whatever you're going to go and watch, thus making the impact far stronger than you can ever have when watching at home, regardless if you're watching a movie that was already released in theaters or if you're watching a movie on streaming. So, and this is not even to mention, by the way, that if you do, for movies that do get released in theaters, they actually get one very strong benefit of having their relevancy last much longer than a film that would come out directly onto streaming. And that is because of the re-releases, that it has several opportunities to actually become popular again. Because there's that first shot where it would be out on the big screen, and then later it would then be released onto digital, and then it would be released on physical media, and then it would be released onto streaming. And then, as an added bonus, if lucky, it would get a chance to get bonus relevancy for like a couple of months if it does get a nomination during award season, thus bringing back the talks where people would go and discuss about that movie again. When a movie comes out directly onto streaming, it's got nowhere else to go. It's got nowhere else to go and navigate after its release in order to maintain its relevancy. At the most, it can only be lucky if it gets nominated during award season. Like if it could get that nomination for like Best Picture or especially for Best Animated Feature, that would be its only chance. And then that's it. People would then go and quickly move on. And that is why that no matter what the movie may be, it will always leave a stronger impact than a film on streaming. I would even say that a bad movie released in theaters will be more impactful and will have more relevancy than a good movie that is released onto streaming. In fact, we have actually seen this firsthand in the past few years, where we have seen some amazing movies actually be released on streaming. Like they would be considered masterpieces, but they would easily get overshadowed by other great movies that have been released in theaters. This is exactly why we have seen back in 2023, Across the Spider-Verse become far more popular than Nimona. And even the year prior, this is why we have seen Puss in Boots: The Last Wish become way more popular than Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. It's because the impact that people had when watching those films on Netflix, regardless of how amazing they can be, they're not as strong as if they would go and watch it on the big screen. Because again, they only saw Nimona and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio at home instead of watching it on the big screen. Now, I know some people might say like, oh, but I watched it on the big screen. Yes, there are like those exceptions, like, yeah, there are times when like Netflix and sometimes they would release their movies on the big screen, but how many people would have done that? Like how many people have seen either Nimona or Pinocchio on the big screen compared to how many people have seen Spider-Verse or Puss in Boots on the big screen? That's the major thing right there. And to go back into the discussion about Soul, yeah, Soul didn't really go anywhere in terms of having its relevancy make a true impact, even if it turned out to be quite a masterpiece. It's the fact that it came out on streaming and it just didn't really have anywhere to go, with the exception of maybe going on to streaming. Or like maybe like there was the award season where it did get a lot of those best animated feature wins, and that was pretty much it. And I know, by the way, some people will say that there are some exceptions, and that's true, but those are extremely rare. Like the most that I could honestly think of is one being Encanto. And I know some people will say that, well, technically Encanto was released in theaters. Yes, but it didn't really get the popularity that we know today until it was released on Disney Plus. So technically there was Encanto. And you could say some of the other movies that were released like mainly on Disney Plus, they also got some popularity, such as Turning Red or Raya and the Last Dragon. And like a major reason for that is because of like Disney's unique brand of marketing, where they would go and keep making them popular, rather it be through like the Disney parks, through merchandise, through Disney Lorcana, and all that kind of stuff. Like Disney has kind of like their own brand. They got their own brand where they know how to make their animated films like highly relevant even after so many years. But then when it comes to like all the other streaming movies, yeah, it doesn't matter like how beloved they can be. Like their relevancy, like they always come and go so quick. Like even if they end up becoming like one of the most streamed movies at the time, like Leo, then immediately afterwards, nobody really talks about it. Like, do you see people nowadays talk about things like, do they still talk about movies like Leo or Nimona? Or especially, I will even say that this is why I personally feel that when studios attach themselves to streaming services like Netflix, they're kind of screwing themselves over in the long run, because it makes it impossible for them to go and actually build a franchise in order to go and sustain themselves. That's why, honestly, I feel like it's very concerning to see Sony Pictures Animation become so dependent on Netflix. That they did the same things that Pixar did, that Disney did to Pixar, that got them immense backlash. And yet they have doubled down and are still doing so to this day. And as consequence, like, even though some of their movies got high praise when they came out, like, you don't really see many people discuss about them anymore. Nowadays, do you see many people talk about movies such as The Mitchells versus the Machines, or Vivo, or Wish Dragon? I'll even add that I feel like the same fate is going to occur when they're going to bring out that K-pop Demon Hunter movie. Like, I know there could be a good chance that movie could turn out to be amazing, and it would get its relevancy back again during award season and stuff like that. But honestly, I feel like when that movie will come out, people will be talking about it a lot for like a month, and then they're going to immediately move on to the next thing, because it doesn't have anywhere to go in order to go and maintain its relevancy. So this is why, overall, I just wanted to go and bring up this massive discussion in regards to the experience with movie theaters and with streaming. And Soul is unfortunately a victim of not being popular in the long run because of the fact that it got released exclusively on streaming. And that honestly sucks. As someone who loves Soul, who considers it as one of my favorite Pixar movies and even one of the best Pixar movies, it's unfortunate that it met that fate. And it really highlights one of the big problems when it comes to streaming services, and when you would go and release a movie there, because like, movies released onto streaming and stuff like that, they happen so commonly. And the fact that you can mainly and only experience that at home, it takes away a lot of the impact and a lot of the relevancy that it could go and make onto people. So I feel like, honestly, it's a very fascinating discussion to really go into, again, to really discuss about why movie theater experiences are better than streaming experiences. So just thought I would go and quickly bring that up. All right, so with that said, now I would like to go into the chat wall, and now it's your turn to express your thoughts on this. How do you feel about the fate of Soul's popularity, and overall, like, what are your thoughts about the movie theater experience compared to streaming experiences? I would love to know your thoughts on that. All right, so let's see. I honestly feel really mad I had to watch Soul on streaming and not get that great theater experience, because that movie, specifically its main themes, really helped me during a pretty hard time in my life in the pandemic. I've started seeing movies in theaters a lot more because honestly, I'm personally cutting studios some slack because the pandemic really heavily affected how we consume our media, but it's also manipulated a lot of studios' minds, and they sort of become too dependent on streaming. Yeah, and I'll even say, like, I know, like, I made a bold statement to say, like, Soul changed my life, but when I went to watch that in theaters, like, it was also a moment where, like, I really needed that impact. I really needed that experience and its message, like, to really go and, like, reflect upon my own life and stuff like that. Like, it was like, honestly, Soul had that limited release in theaters in a moment when I honestly needed it. So that's why I just said that's why I just wanted to clarify that it was a bit of a life-changing experience. Anyways, I absolutely love Soul. It's easily in my top 10 favorite Pixar movies. However, it's kind of unfortunate that people don't talk about it as much. Nowadays, I absolutely agree that watching a movie in theaters is an experience and be blown away by certain movie moments in movies. And honestly, while at the time I understand they put their movies on Disney Plus because of the pandemic, nowadays I think that maybe it wasn't such a good idea. And again, it's not just Disney and Pixar that got screwed over. You got to consider that this was also something that is not just that it's screwed over, but it's still kind of screwing over Sony Pictures Animation in the long run. I mean, some people could say that there are other studios as well that are doing the same thing, like Skydance Animation, but nowadays, honestly, based on the movies that they brought out so far, I have no sympathy for Skydance Animation. And hopefully with the new with the fact that now Skydance is owning Paramount, that, you can pretty much let that go. Focus on the SpongeBobs and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You don't need Lasseter when you got SpongeBob. I'm just saying. All right. I feel like streaming might have a little disadvantage for these movies, but I am glad that later on these releases came. These releases came on Blu-ray and in theaters, so these movies are able to get some traction. And thank goodness that people have been talking about these movies for better or for worse. My aunt thinks that Turning Red teaches kids to talk back to their parents. I highly doubt Pixar would ever fall off, as most people say, but even then, they make great stuff at the end. They can never really apparently the comment just stops there. But yeah, you got to keep in mind, the internet being the internet, they love to blow things out of the proportion. And when they do see something that, seems a little less good than what it used to be, they would go and immediately say, like, oh my God, they fell off. The whole studio's gonna shut down soon. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life because it's not as good as the last thing I saw or the things that I remember back when I was a kid. So honestly, you gotta take what you see on social media with a grain of salt, because people who are really stuck on social media, like as they say, terminally online people, they love to exaggerate their claims. Anyways, I gotta say, buddy, you are 100% spot on with what you said with theaters. 100%. I think watching films in theaters is the best experience because it enhances it to a new level. I won't lie, I do like streaming, but I do collect DVDs from thrift stores from time to time, since not everything will be on streaming, or they could potentially be removed at some point. Exactly. And, and I just wanted to go and say that, and this is also part of the reason why I love collecting DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4Ks. It's mainly because, you never know when they're going to keep stuff on streaming, or they're just going to go and get it out in general. At least I have the ability to watch it whenever I want without having the dependency of streaming service holding on to that collection in particular. Not to mention that it's one of the ways to watch some very rare movies. Like, if I want to go see Son of the White Mare, I ain't gonna go and find it on freaking Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. All right. Anyways, let's see. As someone who loved Raya and the Last Dragon, and I am still bitter to this day that its popularity was handicapped thanks to being released on streaming. I can say that Pete Docter is right. I know the theaters are dying in the age of streaming is a popular narrative, one that I even once subscribed to, but movies need both in order to have longevity, both in terms of popularity and financially as well. That is a very good point, dude. You bring up a very nice point. And yeah, honestly, it's kind of like as you probably know, I actually really like Raya and the Last Dragon as well. But I never actually got the experience to watch that on the big screen. I mean, I was lucky to see Encanto on the big screen, but Raya was never released on the big screen in Canada, and that was because of how Cineplex felt very bitter at Disney at the time, especially with that whole thing of like, oh, have some premium access. All right, I think I'm going to read one more comment before we go on to our final break. I'll go over here. I agree, Matt. Watching movies at home is not the same experience as watching it on the big screen. When I was young, when I first saw an animated movie on VHS or DVD, I know the quality and the picture is very different, but when I look online and that it came out on the first, I was like, wow, I didn't know it was like the exact same experience differently. Even the classic movies during the golden age of cinema air on TV, still not the same impact on the big screen. Okay, you know what? I still got time. There are a few people who do bring up their opinion. This time I'll read one more. All right. To quote about them having Soul, Turning Red, and Luca out just on Disney Plus, and a few people talking about them because of their theatrical impact now kind of makes sense, because the streaming stuff might have worked better in theaters instead of streaming. Exactly, man. It's like I said, a bad movie released in theaters will make much more of an impact and will be more relevant than a good movie released on streaming.